Hi everybody, welcome to June 2007 VTS28. I'm your host Keith. Glad to have you. That's what the theme music would go if I had cool theme music. I just had that lame little puppet show theme music. Anyways, good to have everybody. Glad you're here. It's the summer. Well, in the northern hemisphere it's summer, in the southern hemisphere it's winter, but you guys in the south are weird anyways, so the rest of us will be in the north. Wait, I live in the south most of the time. Never mind. Anyways, good to have everybody. Good to see you here. VTS28 running forward on the topic of detail and how to make detail work in animation inside of a structure. All right. Last month we talked about this quite a bit in a lecture, kind of a lecture sort of way. You'll have to forgive me. I don't have my little microphone. That's because this is a new camera. This is a new camera because this is the second time I'm recording this lesson. The first time was with my other camera, but it died. And all the tape was lost. And so this new camera, which I had to buy while I was traveling on the road, like you care, doesn't have an external jack for the microphone. I have to get a different one for that, an adapter, yada, yada, yada. Anyways, this is a bit of an emergency arrangement. Hope you don't mind. I'm widescreen format. Letterbox, up and below. That makes me cool, all right? So, anyhow, we're going to carry on. This month, we're going to show you a little bit more about how to implement detail into your animation and also where to do it and where in the workflow does it go and how do you think about it, when do you plan it, when do you not plan it, when do you put it in, all kinds of stuff. So I'll talk a little bit on the camera about it. I'll show you a little bit in Maya about how I do it there, which is going to not be Maya specific. In any 3D program you want to think about, the same concept as long as you work with a drawing-based workflow that I like to teach, because I think a drawing-based workflow just makes more sense. That's just me. Okay. Anyways, let me go ahead and reset things to kind of let you know where we're at. You know, kind of a little quick recap on detail and structure. Okay. So let's go ahead and reset. Now, if you remember from VTS27, if you watched it, if you didn't watch it, well, go watch it. If you don't have it, well, go get it. Okay, sales pitch over. Anyways, if you remember from VTS27, I talked about the necessary, the necessariness. I'm sorry, the Portuguese mindset was going there. The need for a larger structure in which to put detail in order to give detail any meaning. Because if you give detail too much prominence without any sense of structure, then it just becomes noise and it becomes difficult to discern exactly what you're looking at. Remember those photographs? I don't know, occasionally you'll see them. They're like little mind tricks, especially in like little kids magazines. I got little kids, so I see them. Like they'll take a super, super close-up photograph of like an orange peel. And it's like this really crazy, gnarly orange pockmarked surface of a planet, and they say, "What's this?" Or they'll take a close-up picture of like a leaf with all the veins and stuff, and they'll say, "What's this?" And you know, kind of like, well, a lot of detail. And that's the point. The whole picture is about looking at all this little detail up close, minus the larger structure, the larger shape structure that gives the detail its recognizability. Okay, so. It's kind of like that. If we're not careful about putting structure in place, and it doesn't matter what kind of art form we're talking about, whether it's writing, whether it's music, dance, architecture, animation, painting, sculpture, doesn't really matter. You got to have that larger structure in order to put the detail on it so that the detail has meaning. Detail can bring additional meaning to structure, but detail in and of itself without structure has no meaning, practically. Okay, I'm sure there are exceptions to this, but for the most part, that's a general principle of almost all artistic expression inside the entirety of creation, okay? That's all you have, is you have detail can bring meaning to structure, additional meaning to structure, I should say, but detail without structure oftentimes lacks any meaning whatsoever. So, in terms of animation, you need places in your work that are structured, that have a shape, that have a particular meaning to them without the detail in place. Now, what does that mean? It sounds like, oh, like all fun words, but what does it mean? It means you need to have, for lack of a better way of thinking of it, you need to have a pose or a moment of action that has a definite meaning already. Okay, most poses, if they're good, already have a meaning. They already express an idea. And what you want to do is you want to make sure that that's solid, that's functional, that's working, that's expressing the idea. It's got structure to it. It's not unclear, it's not ambiguous, it's not like, oh gosh, what does he mean by that? It's got a definite, solid basis to it. Okay, you need to have that working first, and then you can put the detail on top of it. So that's kind of a reset of where we're at with detail and structure, and then we're starting to move it into the animation conversation. And so now the question that I keep getting from students and from people who email me and people I work with, they say, well, gosh, Keith, where do you put detail in? Do you put it in at the beginning for blocking? Do you wait till you're almost all done with the scene and then put it in at the end? Do you put it in somewhere in the middle? Where in the middle? How do you do it? That's a good question. I actually have a way I do it. I do it. Okay, well, let's take a moment and I'll talk you through how I do it. Okay, so that's the question. Where do you put detail in? Well, I guess the question, you can move back even before that, is where do you think about detail? Because you can't do something until you think about it, right? Makes sense, right? Well, where do I think about detail? Wherever the inspiration of the moment hits me. Oftentimes, that's way back while I'm planning my scene. I'll think of a piece of detail for a particular action or a scene or a sequence or an expression or a performance. I'll think of some detail that I want in the motion, and I'll plan around it, or I'll work it into the plan, and I know what I want to do with it. Okay? So I can think about detail anywhere along the way. But where you put it, okay, where in your workflow do you drop it? Let's pretend we're building a house. This is one of my favorite allegories for animation, because I think that animation can't have structure like this. Let's say we're going to build a house, and we have this plan for a beautiful kitchen, and we want to make sure that we have, we've always wanted to have granite countertops, and we've always wanted to have slate flagstone floors, and we wanted to have old oak cabinets, okay? We definitely wanted the oak cabinets. And the other thing we wanted is we wanted these really nice thing over the stove where you can hang the pots and pans, like a pots and pans hook, Just wanted kind of like a really, really nice kitchen. I can think about all those details. I can dream about them. I can plan them. I can actually choose out which kind of stone I want. I can choose out which kind of cabinets I like. I can choose out which kind of countertops I like. I can choose out what kind of fixtures I like. I can go mind shopping and just kind of figure out, oh, I like that, and I can make note of it. But I can't do, as a builder, I can't put any of that into an empty space. I need a room. This room needs to have a wall or more, a floor, a ceiling, perhaps some windows. Well, where do those go? These are different kinds of questions now, aren't they? These are larger structural questions. We need to think about in terms, what's the room going to work like? Well, I can have beautiful cabinetry, but if I can't figure out my foot traffic, my kitchen is a pain in the butt to use. I've got beautiful cabinets, maybe wonderful floors, but if I make the sink this high and the countertops are this high, I have failed the structural question. All the detail in the world is not going to fix that. If I have to wash dishes like this because the sink is, 5.5 feet off the ground, I have failed the structural question of the day. No amount of beautiful cabinetry is going to fix that. It's not a usable kitchen. Or if I make the stove 18 inches off the ground and I'm baking at my knees the whole time. I'm down here and I'm making cookies. This fails the structural question. No amount of detail is going to make this work. I can put beautiful cabinets around this. I can make a most beautiful floor. I can put marble countertops. I can even have fairies dancing around singing, waving pixie wands. And I'm still cooking cookies down here. So, we have some questions about structure. So you can think about your details anywhere you want, in your scene planning, or even if the moment hits you while you're working on it. Oh, that'd be cool. Just make sure you carve out a spot of structure to make sure it works. And before you get going down the path of like, oh, that'd be the coolest idea in the world, make sure it fits your performance. And if it doesn't fit your performance, then you have to say, okay, well, do I have time to tear down a few walls in this performance structure? Maybe build some new things? These are all questions you have to ask in a professional environment. So that's where I think about it. Now let's go ahead and work through this in a way that's, let's pretend. Let's pretend, will we? Yeah. Let's pretend that we're going to have a scene And I'm going to plan through the scene. And then I'm going to show you the scene. Okay, I'm being weird. I don't know why I'm being weird today. Too much caffeine. Too much caffeine. All right. Let's get a pretend scene here, okay? I have a scene where a character is listening to somebody, and then they're thinking of a response, and then they offer the response. Who cares what the dialogue is? You know, do you want paper or plastic? The guy thinks about it, and then he responds and says, plastic. Okay? So I got this kind of this structure of the scene. Guys asked at the grocery store, hey, do you want paper or plastic, dude? And the guy's like, I don't know. Let me think about that. And then he says, yeah, plastic. Okay? Well, it's a fun little scene. Maybe have some fun with it. Maybe the character's distracted or whatever. Whatever we bring to it. Right? There's kind of a three-part beat to this scene. Listening, thinking, responding. Immediately I start thinking in terms of, well, how do I take this three-part beat and break it down into a structure? How do I start building my structure? And I start thinking and I listen to the dialogue and I'll say, all right, that's pretty cool. Let's say if I do this. Let's say the guy's, maybe he's putting his wallet back in his pants. So as he's come down here, you know, down in his pocket, and as he's down, or he's getting his wallet out to pay, you know, somewhere in the order of the things here. So he's reaching into his pocket and he hears a guy and he kind of looks up. And then he's like, I don't know, which one was more environmentally friendly? Do I take paper? Well, that's made out of trees. Trees are environmentally friendly. I don't want to kill trees. Do I take plastic? But that's made out of oil, and that's like drilling oil is not environmentally friendly. I'm stuck in a world where I can make no good choices, no matter if I choose paper or plastic. I'm killing the planet, man. Maybe he's got these problems. So anyways, he's thinking about this in his mind. Maybe he's an overly worrisome character. So he's like, oh, paper or plastic. And then maybe I want to put some detail there. Maybe I want to just do a little hand thing. So maybe he's worried. And so I probably wouldn't cover the face with the front hand. I'd probably use the back hand. Okay, so he could be like this, listening. And then he could be like, oh, man, do I have to paper or plastic? And then he's like, I don't know. And so maybe he comes up with an answer. I'll carry him with my hands. Okay, it's stupid, but, you know, he's got... And then we can show a gag of him walking out, dropping cans of creamed corn because he decided to not hurt the planet. Hey, it's funny. Okay, it's a gag. So, so I'd break that down into 3 beats. Okay, and I have this idea for so he's fishing around for his wallet here. Okay, so there's movement here in the shoulder. All right, and so there's detail. Okay, movement in the shoulder. There's detail there, and then he looks up. Maybe just a quick little glance to acknowledge the guy talking to him, and then he stops and he thinks, he's like, oh gosh, paper or plastic? See, this is detail. A little hand thing. The paper is this way, plastic's that way, paper's this way, plastic's that way. Okay, this, the little hand thing, the little eye dart thing, that's detail. And then he says, my phone's ringing. It's just been one of those months. I wish I could tell you all the stories. Someday we'll sit down over coffee and I'll share with you all the interesting things that have happened to this video. Just know that VTS28 is being brought to you by a great labor of love. Okay, that's enough. All right, the phone rang and conversations. Anyway, as I was saying before I was so rudely interrupted, is these little things are detail. Okay, fishing for the wallet, looking up, maybe the quick look up might be another pose, might not be. I tend to think of it if it's not a major change. It's probably just a piece of detail. And then he does the hand thing, and then he's like, paper, plastic, those are details, little ding, 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 and he goes, I'll take them out in my hands. Okay, so that's a big thing right there. Well, that's it. There's my structure. I plan that out. I've got a scene. The scene has structure, pose, 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 rest pose, if you want to call it that. Okay, so 4 drawings. It's a 4-drawing scene. I can take that into blocking, put it into into a little pencil test and see if that's going to work. I'm like, yeah, that works. Okay, cool. Now, do I put in all the little things like this, and the little things like this, and things like this? You know, like how the fingers are going to overlap and all that stuff? Not yet. There's a certain thing about when it comes to in a professional environment, you have to show your work. All right, these are called dailies or whatever they call them. But most studios call it dailies. So you're given a scene and a handoff. The director tells you, the supervisor tells you, you kind of figure out where it's going in the whole thing, and you've got this scene. Great, I got a scene. Yay, I got work to do. And you go back to your desk and you listen to the dialogue and you're thinking through it. You plan it out with your thumbnails. Well, what I would do is I would draw the little thumbnails of these various poses. Okay, I'll get back to the dailies thing in a minute. I haven't forgotten about you. I'll draw out this pose, and then maybe I'll draw out another pose of the eye up, you know, so he's looking in the eye up. So it might be a little bit of a head tilt thing, or I might just put a little arrow with a little, you know, just to change in the face. Okay, so I'll draw, you know, the upper body, and the head facing down, and then off to the side I'll just do a little kind of redraw of that where I focus on the face and I turn it and I get a little expression in the brow. And then I'll do another drawing like this. Maybe I'll do a drawing like this where the hand comes out, or maybe I'll just put a little note there where I'll say hand gestures, dividing the options, you know, paper, plastic, in the mind. You know, I would write the subtext of what's happening in his mind, okay? He might not even say paper does this, plastic does that. It's just, you know, it's the silent struggle of letting him play out this thing in his mind. I would write that down. I'm planning it very early on. I'm not going to put it in my initial blocking, not right away. One thing is because I need the structure first. You know, these little things, it's cabinetry, all right? It's floor covering, it's paint, it's wallpaper. It's cool, but it's not going to rescue a situation that is completely wrong, okay? So I need to make sure that the basic structure of the performance is right and that it's communicating the idea properly. So drawing, 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 and then maybe another drawing where he's settled back. But I might not even do another drawing. Okay, so that's my thumbnails, my planning. But my planning, I write the stuff down. I write it down. I know I want detail. The thing is, I'm making sure that that detail is fitting inside of a larger structure of performance. The larger performance structure has to give meaning all on its own to what I'm trying to do with the character. What I mean by that is this pose, this pose, this pose, and this pose all have to communicate the intent of the idea of what's going on inside the character's mind and inside of his heart for that moment. They have to carry it well enough on their own. If they're wrong, then the detail you add to it isn't going to make it any better. So if I have, you know, if I have some really, you know, goofy kind of weird kind of strange pose where the guy's, you know, reaching across his body like this to try and get his wallet, you know, the face is hidden and stuff, and I have him kind of do this, and then I cover his face with this hand, and you can't see behind his hand, well, that's not saying confused. That's saying I've just been, you know, caught with a transvestite hooker and don't take my picture for the police photo or for the Star tabloid. You know, it's like cover my face in shame. It's the wrong pose. Okay, it says the wrong thing. It does. This says don't take my picture. It doesn't say I'm in a moral dilemma about paper and plastic. Now, this doesn't necessarily say moral dilemma, but it does say dilemma, or I'm thinking through some choices, or at the very least, it's a structurally sound pose. It says, it doesn't hurt that it's also could also be a reversal, you know, so the line of action goes this way, and I switch the line of action goes this way, and then I move forward, I use the space. It's good animation principles. If I have a really goofy pose where the guy's straight up and he goes, I'll take paper, or I'll carry him in my hands, that doesn't say, I've got a great, exciting solution that I think solves the moral dilemma of the day. It says, Uncle Sam wants you to throw you into the meat grinder of his wars. Okay? That's not what it's trying to say. This is like, I got an idea, you know, he's leaning forward, he got it in there, he's engaged, the face, maybe the face you don't see it, but this is more like, I got an idea. It's different than this. This is a pointing pose forward, but it's the wrong pose. No amount of detail on this with the fingers. You can put finger motion on that all you want, it's still the wrong pose. Okay? I can put all kinds of shoulder motion on this, and it's not saying anything because it's the wrong pose. I can put all kinds of things like this. I don't know, but it's the wrong pose. The structure will be wrong to communicate the idea effectively. So no amount of detail is going to fix that. I think about these things. This is why all animation comes back down to posing. I mean, if you don't have posing, it's the lingua franca of animation is posing in so many ways. That's why limited animation with, you know, like no in-betweens and if it's done right, the poses will get the idea across. Does that mean that the only thing in animation is poses? Of course not. It's not the only thing, but it is very, very important. So you got to work on your poses. You got to work on the structure of your poses. You got to work on making sure that your poses feel natural for the moment, that they communicate, that they have good principles to them. Okay, study posing. Take life drawing lessons. Not just life drawing like to copy reality, but to take the reality that's in front of you and make it better. Okay, more communicative. A good life drawing lesson, a good life drawing teacher will not accept you simply Xeroxing with your eyes and your hands what's in front of you. They won't accept it. They'll push you to say, make that pose even more lively. Oh gosh, that's pretty crazy stuff. But you'll learn a lot. Okay, so that's where I plan it. That's how I do it. So I got my hand. I got my pose, ding. Okay, ding, ding. So I block those in. I look at them, listen to them with the silent knot. That's pretty cool. Okay, I like that. And you know what? I could probably take that to dailies. Getting back to dailies, you see. I can take that to dailies, and I could show that to a director. And if the poses are well structured enough and it plays out with the moment, they could buy off on it. Now you might say, well, I really want them to see, you know, this little like the dilemma in his mind. You know, the dilemma, like, oh, this, but this, but this. I want to see that. Okay, if you want to put that into blocking, here's what you do. You go from this pose, and you might add one more drawing where it goes like, okay, that's it. It's just one extra drawing. And there's a lot of little finger things you do there, but don't add it in blocking because you don't even know if they like the idea or not. So you go from this, and then in that silence, you kind of add, and then you do this. What that's doing is it's saying more will be here. Okay? What you want to be able to give to your director or to your animation supervisor in animation blocking for dailies is you want to have them not be asking too many questions. And there's a fine line that you walk between giving them too much information that isn't well done or giving them too little information and having them say, I guess so. Okay? If you put in too much information and it isn't, and you don't take the time to do it well, one, it might not communicate clearly. Okay, if you take the time to do it well, it's not blocking anymore. Okay, and you run the big risk of having them say, I don't like that idea, get rid of it. Okay, I'm already 2 days behind on my shot, and I just had them look at it for the first time. Okay, that's not good either. If you give them too little, then they're stuck with like, I don't know what he's doing there, and then they have to ask you questions in dailies. And this is like, for me personally, my personal rule is they should never have to ask me, what is he doing here? Or what is he thinking here when I'm talking about the character on the screen? They should be able to watch the screen and say, I get it. I either like it or I don't like it. You can change this or this or this, but at least I get it. If they look at the screen and say, what's he doing right there? I failed in my blocking. My blocking did not communicate the idea for the scene. If I have to talk the director through my blocking, then my blocking isn't good. That's my opinion. Sue me if you don't like it. But it's worked well for me. And you know what? Directors and animation supervisors, they appreciate it. They appreciate not having to kind of go, I guess it's okay. Because they've got people pushing them. They got producers, production managers saying, well, this shot needs to get done by Friday. It's Tuesday. This is the first blocking. Can you move forward or not? And so they got people pushing them. It needs to get done. And he's looking at it thinking, can it move forward? I don't know. I guess so. And so that's what they tell you. I guess that's okay. Go ahead. And what that means is, I really don't know what you're doing here, but I can't make a decision with the little bit of information you've given to me. So you go ahead and spend another day or two on it. Let me look at it again, and when I can finally see what you're doing, then I'll tell you what I think. Scary. That's a great way to end up being late. That's a great way to end up working every Saturday and Sunday of your working life. So when you go to blocking, you might want to put hints at detail in there. All that to say, you might want to put little hints at the detail in there. Like, and then do this, and then come down. And that gives them a place to kind of know, okay, I kind of get that. Let's say they like it. Let's say, that's a good idea. I like that. That's, that little dilemma right there, or that little moment of hesitation. It's obvious that there's something going on here. Yeah, I like that. That's fun. It makes them alive, makes them different. Go ahead. Carry on. And you go carry on, and then you go back to your desk. You're like, okay, I showed them my 6 drawings of blocking, and they liked it. Now I can start polishing all that up. Now I can start putting the detail in right now. Well, maybe not quite, okay? For those of you who've followed along the VTS from the beginning, or at least for the past year, know that when I have blocking, I have kind of like the blocking I show to get the idea, and then I have the blocking I continue on to give more structure to my scene so that I can finish it on time. Okay, so the blocking that I showed him to get the ideas, those 6 or 7 drawings, these 6 or 7 basic drawings, communicating the basic structure of the poses as well as the basic idea behind the detail I have in mind without filling out all the detail. And they say, great, run with it. Now I go back to my desk and I start filling in how all those pieces of structure transition, meaning I work on my breakdowns, and then I work on my secondary breakdowns, and I work on my anticipations, I work on my overlaps, I work on my offsets for different things coming up at different times. I start building all that structure in. And you get VTS 20, 21, and then get into 23, 24, 25, where I start talking about post-blocking cleanup. I get all the way up to the point where I'm pretty much in that linear cleanup phase. I've cleaned up the core, and I've cleaned up the limbs in linear, all right? And this is my workflow. At that point, I've got good, solid structure. And if you look at the timeline, you'll actually see little spaces in there where there are no keys. That's where you put the detail. It's like a little cute little box. Detail lovingly goes in. That's good. So I'll go through, I'll get all this stuff working, and I'll get the transitions, because if your transitions are off, you might have to change your structure, okay? Think of this again. Let's go ahead and go back to our house building metaphor with our kitchen. Gosh, I need some way. There's a beautiful idea for cabinets right here, but I just realized I don't have a door to the dining room to take the food out. So now I got to put a door here. Well, that changes my structure because I have to transition, okay? And transition from one space to another. So I have to change the structure, and that means I have to change my ideas about the details. I have to take that cabinet and split it into 2. Maybe I'll do two stand-up cabinets next to it or something. Who knows, okay? So you make sure you can get from this idea to this idea to this idea to this, well, maybe to this, whatever. You can get from this to this without a problem, to this idea. And make sure you transition, make sure it's timed right, make sure it has the right feel, the right weight, all that stuff. Not polished completely, but at least functional, all right? To get it functional is important, because once you get it functional, then you can start roughing in those details, all right? And detail is really, it's where you find the fun explorations in a lot of different things with animation. So let me talk to you a little bit about how I handle detail and how I think in terms of how do I study detail and put it into these little spaces, okay? Okay, a lot of times detail is difficult to kind of figure out. You know it, you kind of see it in your head, but you might not know exactly how it works. Like, how many frames does this to this? What does this pose look like? What does this look like? Detail sometimes requires a lot of study. So this is where I use video reference. I generally don't like to use video reference early on in the scene because there's so many things about it that become too constricting for myself, for my own way of thinking about animation. I would rather work from clear, strong poses. Plus, this puppet that I have here, this body is not as expressive as my animation character probably ought to be. So I tend to think through and imagine the larger broad strokes of how a performance will work. But, and I'll think in terms like, oh, I want this little detail right here. I know I want it to look like this. I want it to do this in my mind, I know the mental state and I know how I want to communicate it. But I don't know the details of well, how many frames does this to this take? And do I change, does the hand look better this way? Does it look better this way? How does it work? How do I make that work? Do I do it here? Where's the elbow at? How's the shoulder? How's the angle of the head? A lot of these things I may not understand, I may not know if I can't get up and feel it out. A lot of times I'll get up and I'll feel it out, and just go you know, like this. And then I'll just take a moment and I'll kind of like, okay, so the hand's like this. And then, you know, I'll study, okay, so it looks like that. So I'll get a video camera like this and I'll just get up and just that one little piece of detail. I'll go from, well, okay, so I'll act that out. I've already done the blocking, remember? See, I'm a little weird. I do my video reference when I'm studying detail, not when I'm kind of coming up with a performance. And even then, if at all possible, you know, I'll try to just do it at my desk, just feeling my body do it. For some reason, it works better for me. Whenever I get a camera in front of me, I start acting really weird. This video is a great example of that. But, you know, so I'll study it, and I'll study, and I'll go through. And what I won't do is I won't rotoscope it, because, you know, okay, I don't want to subject myself to that level of monkeyness, okay? What I'll do, though, is I'll study it. So I'll frame through it and I'll say, okay, the hands switch from this, you know, to this. There's a bit of a flap with the fingers, but not too much. You don't want it too fluffy. And then he kind of goes, well, and then you're like, okay, the elbow goes out, and then the hand drops down, and the fingers go, and this, they spread a little bit, the thumb drops in a little bit. And I study all this stuff, and I'm like, well, and I'm like, okay, how many frames is that? And it's not so much with the hands, it's more with the fingers. And I make all these notes. And I break it right down. I break it all the way down to the level that I think, okay, now I can recreate that. And I take my notes, I go to that little space in the timeline, I go to this pose, which has been cleaned up, has a nice moving hold to it, maybe has a little marker for it. And then in that little space, I'll go ahead and put that in. Rough, you know, just put it in, linear, you know, and like, okay. And, you know, I'm moving away from everything on the same frame by now. So I can go ahead and just kind of put stuff in there a little bit. And then I'll put that in and I'll watch it. Okay, that's pretty close, or maybe that's not quite right. And I start cleaning that up. Same thing with, you know, rooting around in here for, you know, the wallet to pay. I'll get that and I'll just do that little motion. You know, every now and then, you know, I'll just do it for a minute or so on the video camera and I'll study it. I'm like, well, how much movement does this play across here? And I'll break that down and I'll study it, and then I'll make notes on it, and then I recreate it in the little space in that time in the timeline where I have good solid pose just being held. And then I go ahead and I put that detail on it and then put it in there and see how I think of it. And so I'm not waiting all the way to spline cleanup to put this stuff in, but I'm also not putting it at the very beginning of the scene, because when you put it at the very beginning of the scene, it starts getting very difficult to manage your blocking in your scene, because then you're trying to clean up larger transitions of structure while also preserving smaller movements of detail. And what you end up with is you can't tell the noise from the noise, okay? Because detail, to some degree, is noise, right? It's like, well, you know, this is noise. It's motion noise, but it's motion noise with a purpose inside of a larger pose structure. All right, so I want to keep that, but at the same time, I don't want to keep like little jiggery stuff inside the, you know, the hitchy-pitchy, poppy things inside the spine or the limbs. I don't want to keep that. I want to clean that out. But I want to keep this noise. So it's like, well, which noise is the right kind of noise? Well, the way I take it is like, it's too hard to figure out. I'm just going to work to where I don't have any noise. And then once I got rid of it, I'll put some back in. Well, it's not really noise, but it's detail. Detail could be noise, or noise could be detail. It's hard to figure out which one's which at the right, you know, way early on in the staging. So I'll just go ahead and just build it out. And then I won't put that into blocking because it's too hard to manage. I just keep simple structures, get from one to the other, hold them well, clean them up, get them smooth, get them working right, get a nice, solid, stable base, and then I'll go ahead and put those pieces of motion in there. And yeah, I might add little bits of rotation into the upper chest and counter-rotate with the head to kind of accommodate what's going on in the shoulders. That's fine. I've already got a structure that I know works. So I'm not ruining my structure by putting these little pieces of detail in there if I've studied them. If I didn't study them and I just start putting motion in there, yeah, you can ruin your stuff pretty quick. That's why it's important to study detail. And that's where you can really have a lot of fun with animation, especially CG, because we're working on ones most of the time. You can put lots of little pieces of detail in there. You can also get a little lost in the detail, put too much in, and completely muddy your picture. So as with all animation, exaggeration and caricaturing is really the key. What needs to go in, what needs to be left out. And really the best writing is knowing how to leave something out. And the best animating is knowing what to leave out, really. So, there you go. Oh, one last comment about putting stuff in a certain place. The concept here is that if you wait too long till you're pretty much polished out, then you don't give yourself enough time to do detail right. Okay? Because detail takes study. We can kind of think through a lot of the larger motions and poses. We can kind of see them in our mind's eye, the broadness of them. We can even capture them with a pencil and thumbnailing. When you get down to that detail business, a tilt of a finger, number of frames, this, that, and the other, slight counter motions and stuff. I mean, it takes study, and it takes a little bit of experimenting. You're going to make mistakes. Okay, you do your breakdowns, you do your study, you make it, but it's going to be wrong probably the first time or two. That's fine. There's no reason to throw it away. If you do this and you get it wrong early and you can't tell your detail from your blocking, that's a recipe for ulcers. And I've seen animators do this, and I look at them like, dude, just wait on the detail stuff and get the big stuff working. Young kids, what can you tell them? So anyways, so you gotta pick a time that gives you the time to have some freedom in your timeline of because work is due, right? Shots due Friday, shots due Thursday, shots due today. Who knows? You need to pick a time when you have enough space where you can figure out the little things of detail, where you can make a few mistakes without losing your brain, without cracking down under stress, like, oh gosh, I blew it, and then just throwing it away. Okay? If you wait till everything's cleaned up and you're all the way into spline, you put it in there, you might only have 4 hours left before you have to turn in the shot. And then you want to get the detail working, and next thing you know, you're like, oh gosh, it's not working, I want to take the time, and then the next thing you know, it's 11 o'clock at night, and the next thing you know, you're going home at 1 o'clock in the morning on a Friday, and you're coming in on a Saturday morning so you can turn the shot in on a Monday, and you spend, too many hours on Saturday because, you just end up making your life more difficult if you wait too long, because you won't have had the time to make mistakes, okay? And one of the things about smooth motion, all cleaned up everywhere else, anything that isn't smooth on top of it tends to have a way of standing out, okay? So if you have all this smooth motion, and then you go ahead and you put the detail on there, but the detail isn't working right, you might spend all your time finessing the details of the detail without getting the structure of the detail working. It's like a Mandelbrot, It's like just keeps going and it repeats itself. Structure on detail, but detail has structure, has detail. Okay, that's crazy. Anyways, that's why I like to work in the linear stage, back in the linear cleanup for that, because the whole body isn't perfectly clean yet. I know it's not done yet. There's some rough edges to it. That way, when I put my detail in, if my detail has a few rough edges, I'm not worried about it. As long as the structure of it works fine, as long as the communication matches what I studied, what my study was. Okay, so that's a good place, a good reason to choose that middle ground in your workflow to give yourself a chance. Not too early, because you don't want to have to try and figure out what's detail and what's noise. Not too late, because you don't want to leave yourself short on the chance to do detail right, and detail does take time, and it does take experimenting at times. It does take some freedom to make mistakes and redo it. So that's why that middle ground is really good. Okay, I hope that helped fill in the blanks a little bit for the topic of how to handle detail inside of animation. It's a big topic these days because, the bar is being raised on detail. It really is. You take a look at the work that's being done by the larger studios, and those guys are handling detail pretty well. I gotta say, they're doing pretty good on detail. Sometimes I think they kind of lose the structure, but we all do, right? CG animators are still pretty young by older standards, I mean, you take a look at the stuff that the Nine Men were doing in the 1950s. They were in their 40s by then, Get into the 60s, they were in their 50s and 60s by then. I mean, these guys were, they'd been around the block. By the time you get to Jungle Book, gosh, all those guys are approaching retirement almost. So, they're getting up there in the age, and, they're at least in their 50s. By the time you do Jungle Book. And, most CG animators are in their late 20s, early 30s, if that, okay? I don't know, maybe most of them are in their late 20s if you took an average. So we're a young group, we'll make mistakes. But, all that to say, detail is going to be consistently pushed higher and higher with these performances, especially if you want to have to keep up with the encroachment of motion capture. But we have to be smart about how we handle it. Anyways, I hope these two conversations, VTS27, 28, kind of help dispel some of the myths or confusions about how to handle detail in your work. I put it in mine. Some people say I don't put enough in. Others say I put too much in. Oh well, I'm sure they're both right. But next month we move on to a new topic. We move on to new things, new territory, forward. Until then, everybody be good and keep animating, keep having fun. Don't lose the enjoyment for animation. Keep learning, always keep learning. I have to keep learning in order to keep teaching. Because if I don't keep learning, then I'm no good as a teacher. Okay, and I'm learning some fun stuff too. So onward and forward, and until next time, everybody be good to each other, and all the best, and God bless.